We're going to start. I'd like to call this meeting, a special meeting of the Fargo School Board to order. The statement of purpose of today's meeting is to discuss awarding of HVAC contracts for our McKinley, possibly Madison, and the HVAC projects in general. Approval of, before we begin, we have in the room, we have Linda Boyd, Chris Wallman, Jim Johnson, Rusty Papacek, Dr. Schatz, Dr. Gross, Rachel Agri, Brock Leitz, Jim Free, and Brent Walk from ONE. And on the phone, we have Robin Nelson, Rick Steen, John Strand, and is Paul Myers there yet? Okay, if Paul joins us, we'll let you know. So now the approval of the agenda.
Dinah?
Jim?
I'd like to move item 5, discussion of HVAC projects, to the first topic after approval of the agenda before awarding of bids.
We have a second for the adjustment to the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor of adjusting the agenda accordingly? Those in the room first, please say aye.
Aye.
And those on the phone?
Aye.
Okay. A motion passed. Did you have a question, Chris?
Didn't ask if there are any nays, and I would be a nay.
Okay, I apologize. Any nays? Chris is a nay. All the others. Okay, so Jim, you wanted to rearrange the order. I assume you have something you wanted to discuss prior to getting to the other part, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I guess I'll throw this out to the group just so we kind of understand how we're going to unfold this thing going forward the next 3 weeks. Obviously, the first bid we got back from the Madison opening was high compared to the estimate. It appears, although we haven't went through it yet, that this next bid came in under what was estimated. And I understand that our goal here is to theoretically approve when we feel we can to free up potential bidders for projects that are coming later on the list. My question is actually twofold. Is there from the administration a perspective of priority between these 6 buildings? And the reason I ask that is if we come to the conclusion that we can only do 4 of these projects this year based upon our budget capacity, which 4 would we do? And if we approve a bid, we'll say for McKinley today, obviously that one is in motion at that point in time, and we really don't know the entire scope of the project. So either I think we've painted ourselves into a position where we have to just about approve each of these as they come to us, whether they're high or low, or collectively we're not going to know what we're doing until we get to the end. Yet we will have taken million-dollar decisions incrementally in the process. And while I believe all of these buildings ultimately need the air quality that this project's bringing forward, I'm just curious if there is a prioritization of any type that we should be looking at.
Take that one?
Dinah?
Oh.
I had my hand up.
Sorry, okay. Do you want to say something prior to his answer to that?
If I could. Is this on? Can you hear me? The board unanimously agreed that we would put HVAC in all of our buildings, and budget-wise, we can. But that doesn't mean we're going to take whatever bid comes our way. And I think that the right way to go is to proceed as we have been. We sort of agreed that this was the plan. McKinley came in under. The administration has recommended that Madison go back, and I think we just take them as they come, because we're not going to spend $200,000 over to put air conditioning in Madison, and I have every confidence that we'll get a bid that's within our budget. And I don't think we're going to be spending millions over what we anticipated. There's no reason at this point for us to think that that's the case. So my sense is that we just follow our plan that we have laid out. We approved the engineering costs. We have approved following through with putting air conditioning in all our buildings. And there's no reason at this point for us to, panic because we got one bid with Madison, which happens to have some extra issues with it that came in over. So I don't think we need to revisit the whole process.
Diane, this is Rick when you get the chance.
Okay, Dr. Schatz? Okay, go ahead, Rick.
Oh, this kind of goes off of Jim's question too. Two pieces to my question. What's the current order of the bids? And maybe Brock can just speak to that real quick.
Members of the board, Rick, the current order of the bids, we'll start from the beginning. So Madison obviously was first. McKinley, we will be looking at today. Lewis and Clark will open on Tuesday. Claire Barton will open on Thursday. Roosevelt will open the following Tuesday, and Horace Mann will open the following Thursday. I believe it's the 25th.
And to take off of that then, to get follow up on Jim's question, and perhaps this isn't even out there, but does administration have a sense of priority with regard to which of these projects, if in fact we could only do 5, or we could do 4, but if we can in fact only do 5, which of these projects might be the ones that we should do first?
Yeah, which, you guys decide.
I can probably start, and then Brock, if you want to add in, you can. I want to go back to the whole process that we've gone through throughout the last few months, and that is working on this project from the beginning of trying to figure out what it is we need to do to each building, what are the best estimates that we could come up with, what is the type of systems that we want to put in. We had presentations on that. The board approved to move forward with those types of systems. And so as we start to work through this bid process, I think we're going to see some things that are possibly going to be a little bit up and a little bit down. And I think, though, that what I've been told by the people that we're working with is that overall we still believe that this project will come in at budget. There are, with Lewis and Clark, we're going to see some very tight bids possibly. Could be a little bit up, could be a little bit down. We don't know yet. We'll find out. With Madison, we've talked yesterday about making some adjustments to that and possibly getting that bid much closer to what the estimate was. So, as we work through the process, I think the bottom line is are we going to put air conditioning and new HVAC systems into these buildings? That's the first question. And the second question then becomes, if, as we work our way through it, we find that there are some complexities with a particular building and that's causing the bids to go up, well, then maybe that's the building that doesn't get the first priority, if you will, if that's a choice you make. But when it's all said and done, are we putting HVAC systems in the buildings? And it's just a matter of then what's the timeline? So that's not a direct answer to priority, but it's where we're at.
Rick, do you want to respond before,
Because I kind of missed it because I can't hear everything that's being said. But I think the concern is if we start awarding projects, and for some reason we think we've overrun the budget, and we've already made decisions. If we make the right decisions, so that's kind of where Jim's coming from, I'm guessing. But the point is we've got a big project next Tuesday, and that'll be, I think, one of the larger projects I think we're bidding out, I believe. It's at least, it's as large as the others. So is the concern that we're going to make some decisions on projects that we should have made decisions on? And that's why the priority question, I think, is pretty important. And we should have that in mind now, because at the end of the day, if we get all 6 bids in, we still have to make the decision which are priority, which projects we want to have as priority. So I'm thinking everything I've heard and everything I feel is that Lewis and Clark, for different reasons, is probably one of their priority projects. I could be wrong about that. That's coming up on Tuesday, and I don't think we're going to run out of budget by Tuesday if we approve McKinley today.
which one of you?
Yeah, I have my hand up.
Okay, Brock and Jeff first, though. Thank you.
Madam President, members of the board, certainly, I don't think Dr. Schatz or I are trying to avoid the priority question, but I think there's a bigger question and a bigger scope. I'll start with a simple answer. We have not sat down and said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this is the order we would do them in if we were king for a day. So we have not done that. But I think we need to look at the question being, I look at this purely as a financial decision, that if philosophically we've decided as a district and as a board that this is the direction we want to go for our buildings, now it becomes a question of how many resources have we committed to it, and do we feel comfortable with those resources? I'll take you back to the December 10th memo that the board approved, and let's just talk about construction costs, because as you recall, that memo had a different fee structure from Jim's motion that finally got approved and was accepted by O&E. So let's purely talk about construction. The estimated construction at that time approved by the board was $11,258,980. Okay? You will recall that each building had an estimate, and we're working through that estimate. And one of the things that we brought to planning, and I believe a brief discussion at the board as well, was a decision that was made internally about Lewis and Clark, because a portion, and Brent Waver can speak to this much more technically than I can, but in layman's terms, because of the manner in which a portion of that building is already set up and ready to be air conditioned, we made a decision to not put this displacement system in one portion of that building, because it's easier to put a chilled. Okay, so we need to do some work inside the ductwork instead. That has brought the cost of that, the estimate, okay, purely the estimate for Lewis and Clark, from $2.579 million to a new estimate, Lewis and Clark, of $1.9 million. Now, understand that as bids come in, things might be a little higher or a little lower than estimate, but what I want to remind you of is on a whole scope, okay, that was approved at $11.2 million, we have a confidence that we're working on an estimate significantly lower than that, $500,000 to $600,000 lower than that. So Madison was a little higher. McKinley has come in a little lower. I've got every confidence that at the end of the day, we will come in on or below the $11,258,980. Now the question becomes, is that important to you? Is it about that number, or is it each individual building? And it might be both. At some point, as you saw on Tuesday night, the administration did not bring you a recommendation to award bid because we too were uncomfortable with, is 200,000 as a percentage of overage, is that too much in a building? We wanted to see more as well. But I think we need to look at each project and then also keep in mind the entire scope. And if the entire scope comes in below our original approval, are we comfortable with that? Or do we really want to make sure each individual project comes in on or below? I can tell you from my perspective, I am very concerned about each project, but I am more concerned about the whole, because I'm trying to make sure that we fit two major capital projects into Jim's question from the other night. What is our ability to bond, and do we fit within that $27.3 million between the new elementary and the 6 HVAC projects? And I have every confidence at this point that we will. So that's good news about McKinley talking about, about Lewis and Clark talking about scope. The other thing is Brent and his team have, as a result of looking at what came in with Madison, have revisited with contractors. They understand that we weren't comfortable with that. We wanted them to sharpen their pencils. The other thing is we feel like there might be some room in some upcoming projects. And so I think we've got to consider where we have that. So I just want to give you kind of that understanding of the project as a whole, so that you maybe feel a little more comfortable that you're still working on a number, a big number, at the end of the day that I believe that we will attain.
Okay, Jeff, Robin, Linda, and then Rusty.
I think what I'd like to do, if it's okay with the board, is to have Brent address the board and revisit the process of the bids and the rationale behind why the bids were each individually set up over a period of time. I think that would be good information for the board to hear, because there is a process there and a reason behind that process. And so if that's okay, Dinah, I think that would be good for us to hear.
You can stay where you are, just make sure the microphone is on, please.
I think it's on here.
If the blue light's on, it's on.
It was
Thank you.
lighting, now it's even brighter, so I assume that it's on.
Okay.
The reason why we went through and put the 6 projects, staggered them together, has kind of twofold in the whole thing. First of all is we know that you'd have a better bid price on 6 individual schools compared to just one at a time. Just looking at the sheer vastness of the work, doing the takeoffs, understanding how contractors pull off detailed estimates. If you can break it down into smaller pieces, they can be more finite in their estimating, which keeps away I didn't get everything figured out, so I'm gonna put a little bit extra into it. That was one of the reasons on it. The second reason on there is that we avoid having one contractor having all 6 schools, which we could not allow one contractor to handle this much work. We know they would not get it done and meet it on the timeline that was there. There's actually a third item that's associated with as well is we want to start getting these projects going in the queue. We have them staggered, so if we can get the first project awarded, whether it's Madison or McKinley, we can get the shop drawing process, we get the contracts awarded. I mean, the time starts now of clicking. I mean, we need to get equipment on site to the school so the contractors can get them installed. We have this figured out within days, if not weeks, of when we have to get things going. And, the longer we push this stuff off, the concern is not getting the equipment there necessarily on time for the equipment to be installed. As my mind works through here, I keep thinking of other things. The other part of it is the bonding for the contractors. If we don't have an award here, we have Robert Gibbons Sons low on Madison, and we have Manning low on Madison at this point, or in McKinley right now. They're going through and they're trying to bid the future projects. They can only handle so much work as themselves. And if they are not knowing that they were awarded McKinley or Madison, they could be low on the next project, which to make that work for them, they may have to put more manpower into the project, so they increase their bid price in case they were low on 2 or 3 projects. They know they can be low on 1 because I can take all my manpower and focus on the job. Now if I'm low on 3, but I haven't been told I was awarded the first one, now I'm gonna get awarded 3, I need to have extra manpower in there. So that's the concerns the contractors have, not knowing if a project is awarded or not. So I had a few conversations last night with my contractors trying to find out what their input on it was.
Thank you. Robin?
I kind of stand with Chris here. We had a process in place. I approved the long-range facility plan with the understanding that all of these schools would be air conditioned. This is why we have a fund balance. And I think it's a great question. We need to stay within budget as much as possible. But philosophically, these schools need to be air conditioned, period. And we fight for our fund balance. Now, as long as we keep that in mind in next year's budget, if it goes over a little bit, I'm okay with that, because I think it's a humane issue to get these schools air conditioned for our teachers and our kids, and I think it's a safety issue. So I would stand to stay with our current process as the board previously agreed upon.
Yeah? Oh, Paul, okay, just a minute. Was that Paul or John? Sorry, it's Paul, that's what I thought. Okay, Linda?
Boiling down what Brock said, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that it looks like we're gonna have about 1.6 million savings on Lewis and Clark. If the McKinley estimate came in 95,000 under, we have about, or excuse me, 0.67 thousand, Lewis and Clark. So added up, we have about 1.6 million possibly. So there's reassurance that all 6, when it's said and done, that's what's giving you confidence that we'll hit that.
Members of the board,
Put my name in the queue as well.
Okay.
members of the board, Linda, yes, I have confidence. I don't think I don't think those numbers are quite right here. I would break it down like this. So about purely from estimate now, remember, because the Madison estimate, the bids came in a little higher. So let's say about $600,000 in the changes in Lewis and Clark to the good. Madison came in about $200,000 over, so now you got $400,000 of cushion. McKinley, as we'll review later, came in about $95,000 under, so now you're back to about $495,000 of cushion, just on construction, not estimating fees. So that's, I think, where the numbers shake out, but certainly feeling like there is confidence that there's room from the original approval from the board to what we found out once we got out to bid and decisions we made, because it just made logical sense to save those dollars if you could and still accomplish the same thing. So I would say my estimate right now is that our flexibility is in the $400,000 to $500,000 range. And Brent, I'm going to look at you to verify if that's accurate.
I definitely think so, and you ask myself and my wife and my other colleagues, they always say I'm an optimist. I'm not a pessimist on there. And you were, Dr. Schatz, you talked about this earlier. I think the Lewis and Clark is the next bid that we're going to have is going to be off the new estimate. Again, where original estimate was 2.5 million. With the changes that I found out there, I thought I could bring that down to about 1.9. I feel we're going to be on. We could be $50,000 high. We could be $100,000 high. We could be $100,000 low. That's going to be a really tight one. The part that I'm excited about is Horace Mann and Claire Barton. I feel that those two are going to come in as winners and definitely even help what we already have sitting there as a cushion of that 450 from the original estimate. So.
Okay. Okay, and then Rusty, Jeff, and then Rusty.
I think, Brock, I need you to tell everybody about alternates too and how we're dealing with that, because that's another part of this whole component that you need to be aware of, because there are alternates on each one of these bids. And so if you would explain that to everybody.
Sure. Madam President, members of the board, when we talk about alternates, what we did is we really looked at the proposal that O&E brought to us in whole was about cooling and air quality. That's what we asked them to do, and that's what they brought. As we then started to get into the buildings and dig deeper, we realized that there were other things that, while we're in there, should we also do X? Things like emergency lighting, for example, at Madison, or dual fuel boilers, which would give us the opportunity to be on off-peak so that then we get savings on off-peak should we need a backup system to get pushed off on off-peak. What does that do for us? It helps us with a minimum of probably a 20% discount on electrical costs, maybe even greater. Rusty has some experience with that he could probably speak to. So what we've done is in every bid, we've got a number of alternates. And right now, we're working purely on base bid. At the end of the day, if we end up having $400,000 less in the 11.2 million that was originally approved, we'll revisit and say, should we consider, while we're in there now, should we be penny wise instead of pound foolish, if that's the way we look at it, and say, do it now to save having to do it later if there's room to do it. And do we want to do that? But also, that's not a critical decision today. We can award bids on the base, and when this is all said and done, we can go back 2-3 weeks, a month from now, and say to the contractors, we want to take this alternate because now we feel we have the room to do it and it makes sense. They can start the process on the other things that they need to do. So still, we've got some flexibility in costs. We have some alternates we would revisit at that time if it makes sense for the district, if it makes sense within the scope of the project. And if some of these things are likely on our 10-year long-term maintenance plan anyway. So do you put them in now, do it while the building's open, do it while the contractors are in there, get those things done, and those that are somewhere else on the 10-year plan, then they get moved up because now's the right time. So I would say that is the conversation, and we would address that at the end when we see the totality of the bids that come in.
Okay, thank you. Rusty.
2 questions. These are both probably for Brent. Do you have a sense on Lewis and Clark if we'll get new vendors bidding those? We've had the same 4 on these projects. Do you have any idea? And it's kind of a guessing game, but you've been in touch with them. The other question, in the December 10th memo that Brock referenced, the original number was 10.3, and then we added the high efficiency boilers. Are there alternates in these bids that if we choose not to do some of those, that we could back those out?
Regarding the boilers?
Correct.
Okay, I'll answer your first question first. First question is with Lewis and Clark. I don't know if we're gonna get any new bidders on Lewis and Clark. I know we're gonna get new bidders on Horace Mann, Roosevelt, and Claire Barton. I got some of my bigger contractors that are waiting to get on those projects. That's the ones that they wanna have. I did have a conversation last night with one of the contractors. They are gonna be going after Lewis Clark extremely hard. They're not low on the first two. Their staff is, they have no work this summer. And they said they will be getting this project and they're gonna come in very, very, very strong. And they have been bidding on the other two projects already, so they see where their competition's at. But he said, you might as well put us in for the Lewis and Clark projects because we'll be getting that one. So that's good. That's great news for us. The second question that you had over there is, are we going to, the boiler itself? The recommendation that I said when we came through on the design is that we had steam boilers in a lot of these facilities. To retrofit the steam into hot water takes X amount of dollars, takes about $100,000 to make that switch over. My recommendation is at that point, instead of putting $100,000 into revamping an existing old steam inefficient boiler, let's go in and taking something that's 70% efficient, move it up to a 95 to a 98% efficient hot water boiler at a marginal cost increase of about $150,000 per location. I do not have it broken out that if we chose not to do that, we don't have a design to go back or in place at this point to go back and use the existing system in there. What we did do though, and it was touched on briefly here, is we put in an alternate bid for a dual fuel boiler. A dual fuel boiler gives us the opportunity to run natural gas and fuel oil. The base bid boiler that we have right now is natural gas only. It's a high efficiency natural gas. The alternate gives us still a high efficiency natural gas, same efficiencies, but it does give you a backup to run the fuel oil. Right now your schools are running about $15,000 to let's say $20,000 on the high end per year for natural gas. With this extra boiler that you put on here with the dual fuel, the cost of your fuel goes down or stays where it's at. If you choose not to use a dual fuel option, you go to a firm gas rate, your price goes up 20%, the cost of the fuel. That is still, starting to think a lot of different numbers here, but if you have a 70% efficient boiler already, and you have an increase of 20% because you go to a firm gas rate, but my efficiency of my boiler is 98%, I'm still less than what you're using now. But if you put the dual fuel in there, you stay at the interruptible rate, so now you were 20% better because of a better boiler, and 20% because you stay on that firm or that interruptible gas rate. So that's a decision you want to take a look at, and I can help you through that process, but we can make a decision later on that we have on there. Jim just went over here and pointed out to me too is, I applaud Jim for making some phone calls. We only had one bidder on the general for the first project. The general contractor didn't feel there's enough work out here to keep them busy in the summertime. Why go work on a remodel project when I can go work on a new facility somewhere else? So Jim made quite a few phone calls and got some other interest in the project, which the general number in the first project came in at $250,000, which was $100,000 higher than my estimate. The next project, the general contractor got competitive bids and his price came down $100,000. So it was nice to get that feel in there. So now we have some general contractors, pushing on these projects coming up in the future ones.
Follow up?
Just another one too that I didn't ask about. How about electrical bidders? I'm surprised we went from 3 to 2, and are there more electrical in the queue for the next projects?
Advanced they can only handle one project, and they told us that. So they do have the first project right now. We have 2 other bidders going on this thing. We are making phone calls out there to get other electrical contractors involved in these projects. So I do expect to gain 1, if not 2 more, but Advanced will no longer be bidding on projects. Again, this is that if you award it or if you don't award it, if Madison does not get awarded, we should let them know so they can start bidding on the next projects. Not just holding those guys out.
Okay, Paul?
Thanks, Dana. First of all, I like the direction that the administration is leading us by both presenting the information pro and con, and also doing their best to ensure that we get quality bidding. I think that the school board made a commitment that is ongoing
Okay. Rick? Uh-oh. Rick, are you still there?
I heard a beep, but
Yeah.
I'd like to say something.
Okay, Robin, you can talk instead of Rick.
Okay. And it was cutting out a bit when Brett was talking. The alternate, so am I hearing this properly? The boilers are not in the base bid?
It's a different kind of boiler. There is a boiler component, but there's an alternate for a potentially more efficient system that would allow two different types of fuel. Is that a good summary of what you said?
That's exactly correct.
Okay. Did you hear me then, Robin?
Okay, yes, and
So-
okay, yep, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, and I heard a beep. Rick, did you come back?
I did come back, yes.
Well, then you can speak.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, I just dropped off at the wrong time there. This is probably just a reiteration of what's already been said on a couple of fronts, but I'll make it really short that way. Paul, you talked about, we've made a commitment, and Chris and Ron, a commitment to, number one, keep our schools open, basically all the schools we have, and we've made that commitment. Two, we've made the commitment to air condition them, and, everyone had a chance to vote on that. We thoroughly vetted the process, and all the reasons why, and again, explained, I think, to the board this morning, why that process is critical the way it's being set up. And I support that process still. And then the last piece too, don't know if this came up, were some of the questions were funding, can we afford it? And what we've done, Brock, correct me if I'm wrong here, what we've done is basically said, here's our bonding capacity at about 27 million. That should cover the HVAC somewhere close to some of the estimates and also the new building. With that 27 million, that just considers new funding. What we've ignored in that discussion, at least it hasn't come up, is the fact that we still have $6 million in the building fund. That if we happen to go over budget by a few $100,000, we have a little bit of cushion in the building fund to the tune of about $6 million. And if that's incorrect, Brock, let me know, but that's where I'm at. And so I think this whole process makes sense, to wait. I don't think it's gonna benefit anybody, especially the kids in the schools who wait too long. And I don't think we're gonna save a lot of money by waiting too long.
Brock?
Rick is correct.
Yeah, Rick is correct. Okay, there you go. Rusty?
What is the risk of waiting until we see Lewis and Clark's number on Tuesday? I mean, it's 2 or 3 days. That one is the biggest project, just to get a better handle on where, for me, it's seeing the final number. I mean, that's the budget number I'm looking at. I'm just wondering what the risk is as far as other contractors are bidding, and I guess I'm not understanding that.
Members of the board, Rusty, I'll speak briefly on that, and Brent, who has talked to more contractors, could probably speak more directly. But I think the biggest thing is making sure contractors know, based on their capacity, what they can and can't bid on. And I think if you look at Madison, it's a good example. So you've got one electrical contractor that is laying in wait, the low bidder, laying in wait to find out if they should even bid anymore. If we don't award Madison, might that bidder be the lowest bidder on Tuesday or next Thursday? But they're not having knowledge of whether they're in or not in. If we don't award at all, and that bidder, for example, were to be low on Lewis and Clark, Madison's price just went up, because then they would withdraw their bid, I assume, on Madison, because now they know what they have, they can do one school, they were the lowest bidder. So I think that's the biggest risk, is the reason we put it in this, set it up and staged it like we staged it, is to make sure that contractors gave us their best price and went after each job individually with knowledge of what they were setting themselves up for each time. And at this point, none of them have any knowledge of what they're setting themselves up for. They just know that we're not comfortable with what came in on the first one. So that would be my response to that. And Brent, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Okay. I don't have any names in the queue at this time. Is there anybody else who wants to say something regarding the overall?
I do.
Okay, did I hear John in there too?
You did.
Okay, John and then Robin?
I'd like to go back to what.
Okay, he's going to answer you.
Yesterday, when we took a look at the bids, I was asking questions about Madison, and one of the things that I didn't realize in that process was that the gymnasium was part of the air conditioning process for Madison. And we have not been air conditioning gymnasiums, and so I asked them to take a look, if we pulled the gymnasium out of the bid process or the cost process, what would that impact be? And I'm not exactly sure what numbers they came up with by the end of the day, but that would bring down that bid. I believe that the ancillary carryover of air conditioning the whole building typically has some effect on that gymnasium, and all the other schools, we will not be air conditioning the gymnasium, so I asked them to pull that out. So that's one way that we're looking to adjust the Madison project.
I continue, Madam President, Dr. Schatz. I interpret that then we would be, if we followed that guidance, we would be.
I was told yesterday that we would probably not rebid that. We would just make that adjustment to the project itself, and I could probably have Brent answer that even more better than I can, because he's the one that would manage that. So if it's okay, we could have Brent answer that.
On that comment there, when we bid McKinley, we pulled out as an alternate the cost of air conditioning the gymnasium itself. That number came in, if you add up the mechanical, the general, and the electrical, it came in at about $47,000. I've been in contact with the low bidder on Madison project and let them know that we would do a deduct change order. Essentially, we award the contract under base bid, and then based on the bids, because they also submitted a bid on Madison to do the same deduct, I said, would you hold the same deduct that you had for McKinley for Madison? Because they are identical in all sense. And they said, yes, we would hold that same deduct price out of Madison that we did for McKinley, so we can pull that part of it out.
John, does that answer your question?
Well, then I'll just.
Okay, I think it was up front, but Brent, do you want to?
I'm just going to give you a little bit of insider information on this one, and it's just because I have just done my research. There was, on the first bid, a mechanical supplier supplying equipment had an incorrect number in his bid. He messed up. We went over to their office and talked to them. They're going to hold their number, what they supplied. It's not the contractor. The contractor's equipment supplier messed something up to a tune of $100,000 on a deed that they just flat out missed. They are going to eat that money. So rebidding Madison again, we have the potential. They fixed it on the next project, McKinley. They fixed what they did wrong the first time. It could come back and adversely affect us if we rebid Madison.
Okay. Robin and then Rusty?
So some of these alternates that we're talking about, and Brock had mentioned that it would be in the deferred maintenance budget. I would be okay approving some of those alternates as long as we didn't say, as long as it was included to come out of the future deferred maintenance. I just don't want to spend it and then say, well, it was in deferred maintenance, we're just going to bump it up. I want it to be credit to that line item in future budgets.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Brock's nodding his head because you can't see.
Good.
Rusty?
Two questions. In the original pack that you provided us, there's about 400,000 extra in fire alarms, panels, things like that. Is any of that included in the base bid or any of the alternates? Second question, what kind of contingency can we anticipate? I mean, going to buildings, doing retrofits, we all know it's a lot tougher than new construction. What kind of number, percentage-wise, can we put on these, just so we're all comfortable in the end?
Rusty, and to answer your question, yes, we do have new fire alarms. Actually, in the first two schools, the existing fire alarm, which maybe you guys aren't aware of this, we could not salvage that. We actually had to put a brand new addressable fire alarm system in there. So under the base bid that we have designed right now, we have brand new fire alarm systems going in on the first two schools. Moving on forward, and from a contingency standpoint, the standard across the board is 5%. When you're on a project every model, that's what you typically see on change orders on a project. Our typical change order percentage from our company across the line, we are less than 2%. That's why we tend to feel we're in the position that we are. I applaud helping with the school board, or Jim Free and his staff. We went through each one of these schools harder than I've went through any other school. I'm sitting here, and I have to look every one of you guys in the face, and we put blood, sweat, and tears, went above every ceiling, so I think we've done above and beyond my typical call of duty when it comes to checking out existing conditions and concerns that may come up on this thing. I mean, I was glad to find out we found a structural wall that we had to put a lintel beam in there on Madison that I would have hated to receive that change order in the project. So I'm comfortable at 5%. I'd like to be my optimistic size and say, 2 to 3%. That's where I think we're going to come in at, but our recommendation is to hold a 5% contingency.
Okay, I'm again, no names in the queue, so before we move on, okay, sorry. No names in the queue, so last chance before we move on to the more specific discussion of the McKinley project. Does anybody have any additional comments? Okay, well, in that case, we will now move to the award of bids for McKinley. Yes, Linda.
I move to approve the low bids as identified above for the McKinley Elementary HVAC project and direct administration.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Discussion. Anyone on the phone wish to that I can't see? Okay. Well, in that case, Anne Marie, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Strand. Wallman. Yes. Boyd.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Papacek.
No.
Steen.
Yes.
Goldenberg.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. We will be awarding the bids for McKinley. We also have on the agenda discussion of the Madison project in case there were any additional questions, concerns, or in relation to that we haven't already discussed. So who did we lose? We lost someone there. Jim?
I guess I'm not sure how we do anything different. So I'm going to make a motion that we award the Madison contract as per the memo that was provided at our last board meeting.
Approved and seconded. Chris, discussion.
Brock, can you tell us, is there a difference between this memo and the memo we received at the last meeting?
Members of the board, Chris, there is not. This is exactly just bringing forward what we discussed on Tuesday night at the meeting. If there are to be changes in the scope of this project based on the information Dr. Schatz and Brent have provided us, we would work that through. If your intention is for us to work through having consistent application in all of our buildings to not include the gym, it would certainly reduce what you would be approving here. So this would be the worst case scenario. This was discussion we had late yesterday after the bid opening, and because this was originally on the table, we felt we needed to bring this back to you as it was, provide you additional information, and get your direction.
Follow up, Chris, and then Brent.
My question actually is for Brent. Can you tell me the difference in the sort of overflow air conditioning that would reach a gym in a newer building versus these older ones? Will there be less of an impact in terms of, will there be more of an impact not having AC in those gyms in an older building than there would be in, say, Kennedy or Centennial?
To answer your question, no, there's no difference associated with it. It's just due to how those two spaces are being used in Madison and McKinley compared to their other four schools. Those ones is used for the lunch area over there, so then there's some auxiliary time that's being used for more community type processes where the air conditioning may make sense in there. I can't answer that, but from an overflow air conditioning, getting air into these two schools. The location of the gym is actually centrally located and not a little outshoot like it is maybe on the other one. So getting that cool airflow into that is probably, thinking it through, probably a better opportunity with Madison and McKinley to get that air moving into the gym on there. To answer, just I wanted to say one thing to yours, Brock, is if you would look at the way we bid McKinley, and if we would do the same thing that we did in Madison, we pulled numbers out of here. It is a, again, my number here, I believe it's a $92,000 deduct on there that we would, $75,000 deduct that we would pull out of the Madison project to make it equal to what the McKinley, to have the same systems that we're putting in McKinley back into Madison. So that would be the deduct change order that we'd be looking at.
Other hands?
I'd like to say something.
Go ahead.
Again, I'm negotiating or changing up bid with a contract. It might be to our benefit, and maybe I'm off on, or uncomfortable with that aspect of bidding. Gaps open.
Yeah, I've got you, Paul. Could you two, between the two of you, clarify John's concern here? It seems to me that the contractors, this isn't unusual and that they're aware of that, and it's not like we were going underground behind their backs, but could you clarify that for John's concern?
John, I hear exactly what you're saying, and under some instances, I would agree with you. Coming in after the fact and trying to do a change order to a contract and trying to say, can you tell me how much this is worth after the fact? We always say on change orders, you never get the full dollar amount after the fact because they're in the driver's seat on this particular, in those instances. However, with the way that we went through McKinley and Madison, what we pulled out of McKinley, the pump, the redundant pump, and the air conditioning of the gym, Madison and McKinley are identical. So I asked the contractor, you told me what your deduct price would be on McKinley. Would you hold that same price to pull it out of Madison? And they wholeheartedly said, yes, we will definitely hold that price. So if I would have put in the first project we bid Madison, the same deduct change orders or deduct alternates on there, we would be getting the same price that we just received yesterday. So that's why I feel very comfortable going after the fact, and it happens all the time. We do deduct change orders, and we fight and negotiate with the contractor and go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This happens, I would say, on a majority of projects that come over budget. We were trying to, in this thing, be proactive with alternates. We didn't get it right away in the Madison project. After the bids came made, I made a recommendation that let's pull some of these ancillary things that may not necessarily be attributed to the HVAC project, air conditioning, the classrooms and such like this. Let's pull this thing out and get this project on budget, then we can make decisions to add these things back into it. So where I'm going back with this, John, is my recommendation is that we would award it as is right now, and the number that we would be getting as a deduct alternate onto the Madison is a very strong, comfortable number that we've already seen in the bid tabs already. I mean, it would be the same number that if you rebid it again, that's the number you would be getting.
Okay, Paul?
Thanks, Hannah. I'd like to speak to John's comments about being very uncomfortable with changing the items after we have already accepted a bid. I think we need to be very diligent about what we're doing, but I don't think we can possibly, as a board, micromanage each of those items with any kind of knowledge and understanding, and I think it's okay to leave that up to our administration to determine. It's pretty common in every contract that is bid that there are changes made based upon budget concerns, based upon what you find when you open something up, and as long as we have a team the administration do what we've already approved and get this project moving properly.
Thank you. Chris?
Just reading the memo, and it says that the administration recommends holding the bid award on this project, and so that's changed from what I'm hearing you say. You are recommending that we award Madison. Sorry, hot seat.
Members of the board, Chris, knowing what I know now, both about Lewis and Clark and about potentials on other upcoming bids, I'm certainly more comfortable today knowing that we could do the deduct change order, take a $210,000 overage, probably more in the range of $130,000 to $140,000 overage. We've made up $95,000 of that in the last bid. I'm certainly more comfortable today recommending that you could proceed with that project. But I want to make sure the board is comfortable that we're looking at each individual project, trying to hold our feet to the fire to make sure we don't significantly blow an individual project out from budget, but also keeping in mind the total dollar amount at the end, and I feel that we will be on or below that dollar amount, which is what gives me comfort to move forward.
No other names in the queue, so I'll ask if anyone else has any other comments. Telephone members? I don't see any other hands, so there is a motion on the table to award the Madison bid. Anne Marie, I think we better have roll call as well, please.
Yes, Wallman.
Oh,
Can I look at the motion and who seconded? I missed that.
pardon me, Rick?
Who made the motion and who seconded the motion?
Jim made the motion and Chris second? No,
Linda.
Linda, I beg your pardon. Is that,
Thank you.
okay. So go ahead, sorry.
Wallman. Yes. Boyd.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Myers.
Paul, are you still there? Let's come back to him again and see. I don't know what.
Nelson.
Yes.
Papacek.
No.
Steen.
Myers, yes.
Oh. Okay, thank you, Paul. Okay.
Steen.
Yes.
Strand. Goldenberg.
Yes, please. So thank you, everyone. We have awarded our first two projects. Our next meeting is February the 21st. I appreciate you all taking time out and coming, and I think we had a lot of really good discussion, and I hope that, thank you, Brent, for coming as well, and we look forward to some good bids going forward. So thank you, and have a happy Valentine's Day and a nice weekend. Meeting adjourned.